Fantastic. Well, I think we'll begin now so that we can stick pretty on time. Well, good morning once again. And on behalf of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the UK and the Spanish Consulate in Edinburgh, thank you for joining us for this morning's webinar, which is on the topic of airport management strategies in critical times. So this is the fourth of our Connecting to Spain series of webinars and the first of 2021. And for this morning's session, we're delighted to be joined by Gordon Dewar, who is the Chief Executive of Edinburgh Airport, and Laura Navarro, who is the Director of Alicante Airport. And they will be sharing with us their views on how they believe the pandemic will continue to reshape the travel industry forever, as well as their plans and vision for the months and years to come. I will now hand over to Ignacio Cartagena, the Spanish Consul in Edinburgh, who will introduce the speakers.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hannah, and welcome to all of you who have joined us for this event. I just wanted to briefly explain with some words the rationale of these meetings for those of you who for the first time join us. For the last 12 months, we have been exploring different sectors in which there could be more room for interaction between Spanish and Scottish companies, between Spanish and Scottish members of the civil society. This challenge has brought us to seek interactions in sectors such as sustainable tourism, transports, energy, food industry, and we have together realized that there is a lot of potential. A lot has been done, but there is a lot of room for improving our relations mainly in the economic sector. Today, we are dealing with airport management in a time in which our airports are, facing a lot of challenges. We are in a sort of global challenge due to the COVID crisis. I would not like to exaggerate the similarities between Edinburgh Airport and Alicante Airport, but as a matter of fact, both airports, as you know, are international hubs. They are important airports in both countries. Alicante, I think, is the fifth airport in terms of importance in Spain. Edinburgh is the sixth airport in terms of importance in the UK. They have more or less the same or a similar number of passengers. Of course, I'm referring not to this year, because this has been an exceptional year, but to 2 years ago. They both had around 15 million visitors. And both airports are located between two important cities. In the case of Edinburgh, it's between Edinburgh and Glasgow. And in the case of Alicante Airport, as the name says by itself, the airport is located between the cities of Alicante and Elche. So I think it's a very, very good occasion to have this dialogue between the two directors of both airports, because probably we will find out that there are many things in common between these two institutions, which are key institutions for all of us. Of course, for all those who have a business, but also for, the normal citizens who simply constantly move in a global society such as the one we are living in these days. My last remark before presenting or before introducing our panelists is the following. Sometimes we tend to forget that the airports are not only economic and trade hubs, but they also accomplish a very important social role. And at the beginning of this crisis, we, as a general consulate in the north of the UK, we had to face a very, very difficult situation concerning the minors, the Spanish minors residing in many Scottish boarding schools. Those minors were in need of going back to Spain to return to their families in a moment in which the airport or the air connections were very few. We are referring to the very first moment of this crisis. At that time, we found an excellent interaction, an excellent communication in our friends at Edinburgh Airport. And I had the occasion to express my gratitude to the director of Edinburgh Airport personally, but now I want to convey my gratitude on a public way, because at the end of the day, in those very critical moments, what counts, what matters is people. And we found in Edinburgh Airport very, very good people, very good friends, and very efficient professionals. So that being said, now I would like to briefly introduce our first panelist, the director of Alicante Airport. I'm really, grateful to her for her participation. I myself have to admit that I come from Alicante, and I have used throughout my life very often the premises of the Alicante Elche Airport. Laura Navarro holds an advanced industrial engineering degree from the Universidad Politécnica de Valencia and has a postgraduate certificate from the University of Cranfield in the UK in aviation management. She is currently the director of Alicante Elche Airport, a position which she has held since November 2019. With over 7 years of experience in the private engineering sector, particularly in the field of the industrial automation and control in the production plants, Laura joined AENA in 2006 at the airport of Alicante Elche. Through her management, the airport has won 3 awards from Airport Council International in recent years. Best Airport in 2017, as well as the prestigious Airport Service Quality Award in 2018 and in 2019. Thank you very much again, Laura, for your participation, and you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would really like to thank you, Ignacio, and the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the UK, and also Gordon, for having this time together and sharing the experience. Before going straight to the point, just stand out the importance of sharing experiences, knowledge, and I think it's really good for the aviation sector to have this kind of events. It develops connections, and to overcome this crisis, I think is good to share all these points of view. And I'm gonna share a presentation. Just let me do it, and it will help me. I don't know if you, no, not right now. Can you see it now? Is it okay?
Yep, looking good, yep.
Okay, so I will go through 5 main points, not deep. I don't want to be boring. I just want people and you all to know how is Alicante Airport and general highlights. How important is the UK and Scottish tourism in Alicante? And then I will go a little bit deeper into 2020 and the COVID and all the measures we've been working through. Brexit, just 2 slides just to say a little bit, because it was not only COVID, it has been Brexit, has been a really difficult year. And then talk about the future and how are we preparing. Okay, here you have the overall traffic data for the last 6 years. As you can see, we ended 2019 with 15 million passengers, which it was 50% more than we had in 2015. I mean, we went from 10 million to 15 million. And then 2020, that we came down 70%, 3.7 million passengers. Has been a dramatic year, you all know. This is our route map with Europe, because we are, as you said before, Ignacio, we are a touristic airport, and for us it's really important connectivity. So we have very good connections to all the countries in Europe. And as you can see here, the UK and Scotland are our main markets, but we also have connection with the North Scandinavian countries, Germany, Belgium, all around. Here you can see where Alicante is placed into Spain, just in case someone cannot find it. And just a little bit about the traffic within Scotland. Okay, we are connected to 4 main airports in Scotland. 2019 was 625,000, sorry, passengers, and this last year was nearly 80% below that. With Edinburgh, we finished 2020 with nearly 50,000 passengers. So UK and also Scotland are really, really important, and we had really good connections to Edinburgh Airport. How is our passenger touristic? We have mainly 65% is people coming for holidays. So we are really keep on focusing on the holidays, on the experience, we are focusing on our passengers, our holiday passengers. Some important milestones, but you have said nearly all of them in the presentation, so I'm not going to repeat them. We are really focused on the quality of service and to give the best to our passengers and our companies in order to keep them coming, not to the airport, but also to the region. And we also are focused on the sustainability. So we are in the program of airport carbon accreditation. We just achieved level 1 and we carry on working on that. And that's it, just few things to know how we are and which kind of airport are we. Which has been the evolution of the British tourism in Alicante. I'm gonna show you a graph that is quite representative of the evolution. This is the last 30 years of evolution of the traffic in Alicante. So last year, we went down, we returned to 1995. So it has been, as you can see, it has been really dropped, really important one. But for the UK traffic, it has been even more important drop. We returned to 1992. So COVID has dramatically reduced our traffic with the UK. For us, it represents, as you can see before, between 40 and 50% of the airport traffic. It has remained steady through the years, more than other kind of markets, and the variation have been a lower level, but it has not been the same with COVID. It has had a really important variation. Okay, and that's the 2 first topics, and then I'm gonna dip into 2020, how it has been. Just again, drop 75% in passengers, 63% in operations, also drop in cargo. All the figures went down. And this is our daily passenger traffic between 2020 and 2019. So as you can see here, what you said, Ignacio, the first weeks in the pandemic, in the state of alarm in Spain, we nearly dropped to 0, only emergency flights, cargo, and some repatriation flights coming from countries that we had Spaniards there, or Spanish people there. So here is the same traffic time, but we have a timeline where we can see the issues that came up. The 20th of March, it began the state of alarm in Spain, and the 21st of June, it ended. So then we start recovering. It looked like it was gonna be quite a good summer, but then the quarantine in the UK came up. So we had a quite important number of passengers in August, but then gone down, and this last January and February are being even worse than that. We had the test required for international passengers in the arrivals. And then we had the restrictions in the UK that for us, we are following as much as we are following the restrictions in Spain, we are following the restrictions in the UK. So, because you are the main important market. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about we've been working hard. It doesn't really look like with no traffic. We've been working really hard, trying to implement all the measures, trying to be safe and to transfer that safety into our passengers and also our employees. So we reinforce cleaning, disinfection, we install and place footprints, stickers, tapes to mark the separation between seats, more than 3 hand sanitizer dispensers available throughout the airport. So we did loads of actions, also communicating. We reinforce the website, the PA, the public announcement system, remind us every 5 minutes the obligation to wear a mask, to keep the social distancing. We are still changing all our taps and soap dispenser and all the toilet equipment into contactless, protective screens all around the airport. I mean, that's you have seen all these not only in the airports, but also in all the infrastructure and public installations. And we have also installed the border health control that the authorities require for each moment. We started with the thermal cameras, then we control the passengers on arrivals with the health control form, and then we have to be sure we have people just checking that all the international passengers come with the negative PCR form, and if they're not coming or they have some symptoms or the documentation is not correct, they go to an area that you can see here that we test for antigen. Okay, that's for COVID, but not also COVID. We have been right-sizing our infrastructure. Why? Because we went down to a very small airport. So we had in our mind, we had to reduce the operating costs. We have to do as much as we could in order to be efficient. And we, as you can see here, we developed a system of models, or we called scenarios, but it was just kind of stages, models, settings, I don't know how you say that. But we went down to like a very small airport, only 3 boarding gates. And then we opened, when the state of alarm ended, we opened a little bit more. We had all the infrastructure open for nearly 2 months in the summer. This part of the L here is what we call the international and no Schengen area, that it has been closed since March, only open a few weeks in summer because we really did not have the need to open it. Okay, so less than half terminal building operating, no Schengen and international area closed. It has been really, we have been working even harder because we have to readapt and be flexible and adapt our operations, our resources, allowance, everything in the airport in order to be as much flexible as we can. And that's what I wanted to say about 2020 and the COVID measures and the right sizing. And I just want to speak a little bit because if we did not have enough, it came Brexit in January. And for us, as you have seen, we are an airport depending on the UK and Scottish passengers. So we have to change and we have to move forward and change our border controls and our customs. It has not been only this year. We started in 2018 installing new boarding machines. These are automatic biometric and autonomous. I mean, trying to make fast the pass through the border. We are coordinated with the Spanish National Police, and more than 70 new machines have been installed for this control movement of people around to cross the border in the airport. And we are also still working, but it has already opened. We have a new arrival area in order to have a common hall, because as the Brexit, the UK came as kind of third country, we have to change our customs, and we are really focused on giving the British passengers as much comfort and quality of service as we can. Okay, this is it. We are managing crisis, and we are also preparing for the future. It has to be like that. Otherwise, we want to be there once, because we really hope this is gonna overcome and we are gonna be back to the airport that we were before. We as AENA, as an operator, as a network operator of the airports, we are working on sustainability, innovation, and technology. Our goal is to reach zero net emissions by 2040. And we are also working in the self-supply from renewable energy facilities. We are speeding up into the digital transformation. It has to be like that. It has been like an order, otherwise we cannot survive. We are also working with our program of AENA Ventures in order to have startups, acceleration programs, and training the employees to change their minds into an agile methodology of thinking. And that's it. That's what I wanted to say, mainly just to remind some final messages, how important is the British and Scottish market for us, for Alicante Airport, and for the region. We must work hard on traffic recovery and being safe and protecting our passengers and our teams, of course. We cannot forget that we have to be cost efficient, otherwise we will not survive. And our important challenges, sustainability, innovation, technology, as key leverages for this future. And just before going to an end, I don't want to leave the presentation without sharing a picture of one of our beaches. I just say we are waiting for you all to come to Spain, to Alicante. We have little rain, sunshine. I know you have the highlands and the wild nature there, and I think we are really like a complementary kind of destinations. And you can find huge white sand beaches, and you can also find like corner paradises all around the Costa Blanca. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, and hope you enjoy it. I'm gonna leave the presentation. That's it.
Thank you very much, Laura, and I thank you for everything, but except for the last images, you know, of a very sunny day in Alicante, because today it's a little bit rainy here in Edinburgh. This is a typical, you know, one of the typical last days of the winter. Afterwards, you know, the spring is really beautiful. Well, a lot of words, interesting words emerged came up in your presentation. Of course, COVID, it was really impressive to see those dramatic graphics just decaying, you know, from 2 years ago. Then you referred to Brexit. This is another issue that would definitely come up in the Q&A session. But you also referred to sustainability, you know, and to the energy challenge and the energy transition. And this is another aspect which is of key importance for airport management. Let's remember that this year, by the end of this year, Glasgow hopes to be hosting the next COP, the COP26, the same way that Madrid did last year. So this is another matter that will most definitely come up during the Q&A session. Now I would be passing the floor to Gordon Dewar. I will be introducing him briefly. Gordon Dewar took up the post of Chief Executive of Edinburgh Airport in July 2012, with the airport experiencing 63% growth in passengers from 9 million to 14.7 million passengers in 2019, as we said beforehand. This is a record for any Scottish airport. Rebranding the airport as the place where Scotland meets the world, Gordon has overseen significant capital investment in capacity, productivity improvements, and customer service enhancements that have been recognized through airport and wider business awards in Scotland, the UK, and internationally. Gordon has worked tirelessly to steer the airport through the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring it stays open throughout and diversifying the approach. He has spent 4 years with BAA running Glasgow and Edinburgh airports through periods of extensive investments in terminal capacity and passenger growth from 2007 to 2010. And he then spent 2 years as chief executive at Bahrain International Airport, creating an independent and profitable business for the first time after a carve out from government. Gordon is also a board member of the Scottish Tourism Alliance, and we have to remember that not so long ago, back in December, we had the president of the Scottish Tourism Alliance, Stephen Leakey, with us, discussing on sustainable tourism with the president of Paradores de Turismo, the Spanish public hotel chain. And without further ado, Gordon, please, you have the floor. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ignacio, and thank you, Laura, for your comments before. And hola, buenos dias, everyone, and thanks for finding the time. Alicante is a very familiar airport to me, actually. I have a friend with a place just north, about an hour's north of Alicante in Javea, where I spend some time most years. And in fact, last year, my only flight during the COVID crisis was through Alicante to go and visit them. But regrettably, I got my timing very badly wrong and got caught in the quarantine and ended up having 2 nights in Spain and 14 nights in my flat thereafter as part of the lockdown. But there we are. I think Laura has covered an awful lot of the common themes between us, and that's not a surprise. We are very closely connected airports. We've got very many similarities. So I won't go over an awful lot. I won't repeat what Laura's already told you about the nature of travel between Spain and Scotland. I think there's more similarities than difference. But what I do want to talk about is maybe some of the variable impacts of demand on each of the types of demand that are there. A little bit about the route to recovery, and in particular how we're going to respond to ongoing COVID risk, and really talk about, or rather not talk about, how we've had to deal with the problem the last year, other than saying it's been an incredibly painful process. We've lost about 1/3 of our colleagues through redundancy last year. And obviously everything is about preserving cash and going forward, but that's true for so many other businesses. I'm happy to take questions on that, but I won't dwell on the negatives just now, but more think about how we're going to come out the other side and go to the positive. So first of all, in terms of the nature of the market, again, Laura's said an awful lot about that. I think there's a huge similarity between what we see at our end of the route in terms of Edinburgh's market and what Alicante see. We've probably got a little bit more general business, but I think in nature of the Spanish and Scottish market, there's obviously a clear alignment there. It's surprising, actually, though, that not only is it all about Brits and Scots going to Spain for the holidays, but we see a huge influx of Spanish coming to Edinburgh as well. Scotland as a whole has got a very strong demand for Spanish tourism. But actually, the city of Edinburgh, because of its cultural links, particularly things like the festival, but also the universities, overrepresents interest from the Spanish demand coming in. And then the other nature is we've got a huge amount of VFR on the back of that. Huge numbers of young Spaniards came to work in Scotland and the wider UK over the last few years. Many came to university and stayed, so we get a lot of VFR with families still visiting now that they're settled here. We've probably got 40 or 50 Spanish colleagues working in the airport, for example, just as one example of where people are. And of course, the Brits have got a huge number of second homes in Spain as well. So we get a lot of non-seasonal travel where people actually will winter in Spain, largely to avoid the Scottish winter, as Ignacio was explaining in terms of weather impacts there. So what's interesting about all that is how that's all going to be diversely affected by COVID. And I think you've got to think through the individual markets and what's likely to happen. And if I start with business, not the biggest percentage, I think Laura was saying 13% of her business at Alicante Airport. It's about 25% of the overall business in Edinburgh Airport, so meaningful. And I think everyone acknowledges that a lot of that's going to be a bit slower to recover. For two reasons. One is we've got all these government restrictions, but equally corporate entities are going to have risk management for their own employees, and there's going to be restrictions on when they let their staff travel, even when governments don't have restrictions. But also I think lots of speculation about how much of this video technology is going to impact in the long term. And there's no doubt that I think that things like internal communications and one-to-one meetings will see a lot more use of video rather than getting on planes to visit. But I still think there's going to be a strong need for face-to-face around some more collaborative type things, sales, getting to business conferences, all the things that we know the Zoom doesn't work for. And I, for one, can't wait to get back on a plane and meet people again rather than go through the very second best, which is the digital platforms that we're also used to using now. But inevitably, that is going to be a slower recovery. That being said, I think leisure's got an opportunity for a massive bounce back. You know, we hear from the Bank of England about how much money people have saved over the period if they've kept their jobs, and that's not true for everyone, but those that have stayed employed have not been able to spend their money, so they've got a lot of dry powder to get out there and do things that are a lot more fun than they've managed to do for the last year or so. But equally, there's those that will just see a residual risk. There'll be those that are just reluctant to travel at all. Because they're still fearful of the disease itself. I think there's an element of that. There's a bit about those that haven't done so well economically, have maybe lost their jobs and therefore can't afford to travel or want to preserve their savings until they've got more certain outlook. But I think there is this enormous pent-up demand. So I think we'll see a very fast recovery to 50 to 70% of original demand, maybe even quicker than that in the short term as people make up for the lost year and a half or 2 years of travel. But equally, I also worry, and I'll come on to this in a minute, about the brakes, the friction that the new processes are going to put in place. And there's a really interesting parallel here, I think, with the security changes we had to make back in 2007 around aviation security and the new liquids rules and all the things that came in. And those of us that are old enough to remember that, remember the queues and the frustrations and as an airport operator, the massive additional cost of having many more staff in security, much more technology to screen for liquids and so on. And there's no doubt that put quite a long-standing break, a bit of friction into the system that we still live with today. That feels normal now, but certainly wasn't back in the day. And I think that's a really good parallel. I'll maybe come back to that a little bit. So looking at if all of that's true, and we think there is opportunity to get that growth back, and we saw, as Laura commented, how fast some of that demand comes back as soon as you take the brakes off. Back last summer for a couple of months, we saw very, very strong recovery. So there's opportunity. But there's going to be new measures that are probably going to be with us for years, if not longer, around how we're going to manage that risk. So first of all, vaccine is going to be the long stay answer. We're going to have a wide roll of vaccine. The UK has started well, but I've got no doubt at all that the rest of Europe will catch up very rapidly. And I think that both manages the level of disease, but also manages things like the risk of transmission and gives people confidence that they can travel and gather together again, albeit in slightly different ways. So clearly a vaccine passport type technology is coming. Now that's an additional bit of requirement for passengers. So there's a bureaucratic and potentially a cost element of that. I still think we're going to see a lot of testing for the foreseeable future until the vaccine is almost fully rolled out across not just Europe, but potentially further. So we're going to see use of pre-departure testing and potentially testing in local areas. So you're on holiday and want to go to a sporting event or go to a large gathering, a concert, it may be that we still see testing there. So again, we're all going to have to get used to how we deploy that and how fast we can do it and the cost of that. And I think we're going to see lots of social distancing norms going. And Laura has painted a very strong picture of how well Alicante's responded to that within the airport, and Edinburgh's done exactly the same. In terms of new signage, the way we set things up, the way we allow people to wash hands, clean hands, and so on. I think a lot of that is going to be with us for the long term, certainly for 2 or 3 years, until COVID or the residual remnants of COVID has become just as flu as today for the rest of us. I think there's a lot of putting into that. So the challenge, therefore, is all of these things are restrictions, whether they're cost, time, or just bureaucracy. And they all undermine confidence. People don't like new processes, don't like the idea that there's something getting in the way of the very great convenience of getting on a plane and flying off in a relaxed mode. All of these things get in the way. They also get in the way of our business. So we might need more space that we don't have at the or won't have or haven't designed for. We might get less people in restaurants and airports. We might need to have lower seating densities around the terminal building. And we might need to put new processes in, like testing regimes, and find new ways of doing that. And again, I liken this to the idea of the security process we put in around liquids particularly, but just about general screening. And it was horrendous for many months. If we all remember the queues for security back in 2007, 2008, it took, what I did like was the industry was challenged to deliver a standard by governments, European-wide and worldwide, and we did it. I wish we had adopted that approach on COVID earlier, where governments have tried to do everything themselves with very mixed outcomes and quite poor outcomes in many cases, not least the latest hotel quarantine, where government has made a right mess of that and could have asked the industry to do it on their behalf. But I think when that's established and when standards are agreed, the industry will respond very well. And I can see us being able to offer very rapid testing at affordable rates very quickly if we're shown the standard that we're requiring. But I think what's also interesting is that we must try and find ways of knowing when we can remove these requirements. That's not been the case. So liquid testing in the airports is still here, where arguably it had a shelf life that could have been removed. But I observe that it's very easy for politicians to put new standards and tests in. It's very difficult for them to take them out again, because they have to justify that that risk has gone away and that people can take confidence. And that's a far harder sell for a politician than the opposite. So I do worry about layer after layer of controls, which have their moment just now when we're in the middle of the crisis, but we might be left with and stuck with for a number of years after. So that's a constant challenge that we have to persuade government. They have to not only put these things in well, and as I say, asking for our help would have been a good start, but know how to take them back out again in the future. So anyway, I come back to the kind of fundamentals of that. So I'm really confident that as to what we get through this year. We saw the UK announcing their pathway out, at least for the English market, later this year, and we're here today from the First Minister of Scotland about what Scotland's version of that will be. So I've got no doubt that towards the end of this year we'll be in a recovery. I'm not quite sure how fast that will be, but those of us like me who would just be delighted to get on any plane will take that opportunity whenever they're given it. So we'll see a pathway back to something approaching normality, although all of the forecasts for the industry are that that could be 2024 before we get back to 2019 levels. That's very painful, and there will be additional costs in there. I worry a little bit about the Scottish market because we've been very risk averse, been very strict with the controls. One of the play outs of this is how fast you can persuade airlines to come back, and there are going to be less aircraft in the skies in 2022 than there were in 2019. So if you're late at giving airlines opportunity to rebuild their network, the chances are that you will have less of a network than you would otherwise have, because aircraft are going to be allocated. What I can hope is that markets like Scotland and Spain will do well, because they've always been traditionally very strong and very robust, as you saw from Laura's presentation. But that won't be exclusively true across all networks, and particularly new connections that we've made in the last few years that are maybe still there to be designed. And I also think Laura's comments about how we're going to do things differently chime with us as well. We're already on the digital revolution. Laura, I'll speak to you after about we're selling car parking management services for airports. We'd love to talk to you about that. Equally, we're looking at our sustainability agenda. We too are looking at solar arrays. We're looking at new technology around battery vehicles and so on. And we're trying to work with the whole industry, the whole tourism industry in Scotland, around finding a way of greening that tourism agenda. It's a big part of the demand we have. But equally, I think we've got, as an aviation sector, we've got to acknowledge that our reputation in sustainability is quite low. We're seen as a big problem that's difficult to solve. I think it's overplayed, but we need to grab that by the scruff of the neck and prove to the world that we can operate sustainably and well for the future, and that we're not the problem child that people should feel bad about using. So I'll stop there. I won't go into the detail on that. That might well come up in questions, I'm sure. But thank you for the opportunity to speak about this, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank Thank you very much, both of you, Laura and Gordon, for those questions. So yeah, we now have some time for Q&A. If any of you in the audience have any questions, please do write those into us. So you have there the chat function at the bottom of your screen and also the Q&A function. And yeah, just please write those into us and we will direct those to the panelists. Okay, so here's one for both of you, Gordon and Laura. The COVID pandemic has radically challenged the business strategies of many airlines. How can airports help airlines to navigate these extremely uncertain times? So whichever of you would like to take that one first.
Well, let me go first then I'll pass on to. So I think two things. I think, and one's positive and one's more difficult. So the positive one is I've always been really good at explaining to airlines where their opportunities are. Airports are actually much better placed to understand their local markets than airlines are, because they've got to look at hundreds and hundreds of potential routes they could use. Whereas we're selling the other end of a route. You know, we've always got one end anchored firmly in Scotland and in Edinburgh. So we've spent a huge amount of time explaining developing the capability to explain opportunity where customers currently travel, where they have to travel indirectly, and even nowadays using all of the online engines, all the data about where people are searching but can't find service. So that's been a huge win, and we give very, very comprehensive propositions to airlines about how they can make a successful business at Edinburgh and Route A or Route B or whatever it is. So that's the positive, and I think we do even more of that as airlines are obviously looking to focus on the strongest routes to come out of this and get back towards profitability and operations. I think the more difficult one is the balance of power shift between airlines and airports. There are going to be less airlines, there are going to be less aircraft, and therefore we're going to have to be a lot more competitive with other airports to get airlines to come here. And then inevitably that means price pressure. So even when we get back to the same number of passengers and potentially the same number of routes in a few years' time, the chances are we're going to have less income from these routes and passengers, because we're going to have to have done deals in a competitive environment. Now, you know, some people say that's good because the consumer will benefit, and there's an element of truth to that. The downside is airports are incredibly capital intensive. And, you know, and margins matter when you have to borrow money to build capacity. And of course, not just capacity, but build better, you know, building that sustainable agenda. Solar arrays don't come free. So, you know, we are going to have challenges about how we get back to margins and sustain the levels of investment that we have historically enjoyed and have benefited from. And I say we, I mean the whole country. I mean, we are, you know, a nationally important asset for the country because of the connectivity we provide, even if you know the operations. And it's a great international business. You know, Ferrovial, obviously a Madrid-based company, still own 50% of Glasgow and Edinburgh. When I joined airports with BA, they owned all of the 7 big airports in the UK, including all 3 Scottish ones. So that connectivity is a European and worldwide of interest. And airports are going to be a tougher business to be in for the foreseeable future.
I completely agree with what Gordon said. I just add, we are working now together, and I think we have to keep on working in that processes. Processes are changing. We have one process more with the health measures. So we have to work together in order to make them, that's easy for them to be in the airport and be easy for us to have them. So it has to be like a complementary and work together kind of approach for the processes at the airport. But of course, connectivity, and it's not going to be easy, but it has to be. So we have to work together, yeah.
So you're on mute.
Sorry, my bad. Sorry about that. Another question for both of you is the COVID pandemic has radically challenged business strategies of many airlines. How can airports help airlines to navigate these extremely uncertain times?
No, but this is the one you already made, I think.
Nearly the same answer.
Oh, that's. I'm so sorry. I've read that one twice. Sorry about that. Sorry. So this is the second one then. There's a very intense debate taking place about the green recovery after the pandemic, which is a sustainable model in order to get out of the crisis. How can airports contribute to this green recovery, in both of your opinions?
Laura, do you want to go first on that one?
It's okay. It doesn't really matter. We just said we have to work towards sustainability. So we have lots of things to implement at the airport. And as Gordon said, the green thing in the aviation sector, it has been not a very good thing in the last years, and we have to work, but we also have to sell it. I think there are lots of things we can do, but not as much as being. I mean, we are a little part in the process. So we have to work, and we have to work together with the airlines. I think they have much bigger part than us, but not for that, we do not have to work. We have to be there and keep in mind that with the sustainability is the future. So otherwise it's going to be this bad idea. We have to change it.
Yeah, I think that's right. For me, you've got to get your own house in order. So as an airport, you know, if those of you familiar with the sort of way the corporates look at sustainability and carbon in particular, there's these various scopes. Scope 1, what you do yourselves on site. Scope 2 is how you kind of buy your energy that's created off site. Scope 3 is your supply chain and how you deal with that. It's actually relatively easy for airports to get pretty much carbon neutral on scope 1 and scope 2. Now, scope 1 is about things like having electric vehicles and you know, things that you can generate your own energy, for example. Scope 2 is largely about how you buy energy, but also it's how we include how aircraft taxi around on the ground. And actually that's by far and away the biggest part of our emissions is aircraft moving around on the taxiways and so on. And even then, even though that's not within our direct control, we are confident we can get to sustainable net zero on both of these scopes, which is what we directly have an influence over within 2 or 3 years. So I think we're going to buy a seat at the table by doing that. We can point at our own performance. But the problem is scope 3 is people coming to the airport. Really hard for us to influence that directly. I can't force passengers to buy electric vehicles. Can't get bus companies to go electric overnight. So we've got to think about how we do that. And then the really interesting one, I think we can't dodge because of the nature of our business and the unique nature. We've created this concept of a scope 4 we've kind of made up, which is about all the aircraft emissions in the sky, which, you know, even if you say we're whiter than white, everyone goes, yeah, but all you're doing is facilitating aircraft. So, you know, it doesn't work. The industry as a whole still doesn't stack up. So I think we've got to confront that head on. And there's 2 ways of doing it. One is reminding everybody about the wider value this stuff does, whether it's the economics and the employment of tourism, but also remind people it's not as big a problem as you think. Now, if you put it in kind of monetary terms, because I think people get the idea about this, if you think about the cost of carbon, because there are carbon markets and because people will sell you carbon credits because they can do things to absorb carbon, current cost of carbon is about £19 a tonne. The average flights within Europe, and we're one of the harder ones because we're on that sort of northwest periphery of Europe, so we tend to be a bit further. Our average flight to and from Scotland, both directions, the cost of carbon is £5. Now, I think if you put that in the context of, let's say, tourism, where people are coming for a week and spending £800–900, I think that's a challenge and a value that we shouldn't shy away from. Now, the problem is we can't ask the airline to absorb all that because they're already operating at tight margins and £30 fares, so £5 is a big proportion. But if we can get the hotels and we can get the other travel providers and the people in the system that are taking hundreds of pounds of value to contribute a few pence here and there, I think that's meaningful, and I think we could start doing a lot more to reassure people. And I think it's fascinating for countries like Scotland and Spain, who are so dependent upon inbound tourism. Wouldn't it be a phenomenal competitive advantage to say that you're amongst the greenest or the world's greenest tourism environment? And I think that's doable if we just confront it head on and get the whole industry to understand that, you know, this is not something we can duck. This is something we have to take responsibility from start to finish of the journey. And that includes getting on the plane and going to the destination.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Gordon. Gordon, we've got another question, which is just for you. This one is, says that it looks like the UK staycation market will recover quicker than that for international tourists. Obviously, you know, particularly this summer, that's what a lot of us are thinking. How can airlines and airports react to this new demand?
Well, this is where I might get a bit contentious. Firstly, by pointing out how stupid that is. You know, there is no logic that says a country like the UK closing its borders is in any meaningful way going to address the problem. If you've got endemic levels of infection in your country that are not significantly lower than other countries, there is no purpose to closing your border. It's all about how you lock down society and how you have societal spread. And it doesn't matter whether you catch it in a bar in Alicante or whether you catch it in a bar in Glasgow. You've caught it and you are then going home and mixing with your community. So my biggest regret here is I think it's been very convenient political sop to blame, and I'm going to use deliberately evocative term, the dirty foreigners for the problem. This is verging on xenophobia. It doesn't make any sense. The most prevalent variant of COVID across Europe at the moment is the one that started in Kent. So the idea that we close the border to Spain is going to make a difference to this is just stupid and very damaging. In terms of tourism, you know, the problem with UK tourism is that the Brits might well go to Cornwall or the Highlands of Scotland, but the capacity in these areas is actually quite small. The vast majority of tourism in terms of volume and value and jobs is city-based tourism like London and Edinburgh. And people in Glasgow are not going to come and stay 7 nights in Edinburgh Hotel. That's stupid. You come for the day and you go home again. So they're missing the point. This is not going to work, and it's not addressing the risk in the first place. Where I totally get the issue around, you know, protecting from new variants and having to wait until things are safe enough to travel, but making a significant differentiation between something like European travel and domestic travel is stupid, misguided, and pointless.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thanks, Gordon. Laura, another question. A question for you. We've got due to the economic crisis, Spain possesses a lot of airports that are currently closed and with very low traffic running through them. Some of these airports are located in neighbouring regions to Alicante, such as Murcia or La Mancha. Do you see any future role for those infrastructures? Do you think that they should open in the future, and if so, would they become competitors for Alicante Elche airports?
In Spain we have AENA is the main operator. It runs 46 airports. So even if they are not being closed, they have been closed for a period and reopen and then open in some timetables during the day or depending on the demand. So I don't think they're gonna be closed. They're just going to adapt better to the demand. If the demand comes, they will be there. I don't think they will be competitors in a way to Alicante, because probably we are in the same network. So it depends on the connectivity and how airlines will recover, how quick we will come back to 2019, and they were all there and we all work properly. So I don't think they are going to be competitors. I think they're going to recover in a different way, but hopefully I want to be positive and they will recover, and we will do it too together in a different amount or different size.
Makes sense. Cool. Thank you. Okay. Well, we've got a few minutes left, and we just had one last question, which is for both of you, relevant to both airports. So both airports are located between two different important cities. So the Alicante Elche Airport is located between Alicante and Elche, and Edinburgh Airport is of course located between Edinburgh and Glasgow. Is this rather a challenge or an advantage for airport managers? And does the dialogue with different local authorities add tensions to the already difficult day-to-day task of running an international airport?
Okay, Gordon, should I start and you finish? Is it okay?
Yeah, please go for it.
Okay, I think it's an opportunity for an airport being into two main cities. Is market that you have there. It's not only the tourist, it's also the local market. And about relationships with the local authorities, I think that's vital. I mean, we have to be part of the local society, and they have to see us as an important part. We are trying to give employment to the society. We have connectivity, so I think we are in strength for the society, and they have to see us as that. And I think it's our job to try to develop that kind of relationship for us and for them. I think it's really important. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, same thing for us. I mean, we are obviously geography, position is everything in airports. It's about, it determines what your market you're serving, and being as central in Scotland as possible, which we are, to the west of Edinburgh and to the east of Glasgow, is very helpful. And that's been demonstrated by our market share gains over the last sort of 10, 15 years. And that's really accelerated since 2012, because previously Edinburgh and Glasgow were owned by BAE, so they're like the AENA type model where there was no point in competing. But since we've been allowed to compete, Edinburgh's done very well from that. And part of that is because of our geographical location. I would also argue a bit of it's about some of the skill of the management team, but that's another matter. So, you know, we do see that as a massive opportunity. In terms of working with local authorities and maybe national government is probably more relevant in many of the policy areas. It's absolutely crucial. You know, we're here to do a job that's far more than just run an individual business. I mean, on the campus, I'll use 2019 numbers because they're the ones that everyone understands, but obviously they're about outdated now. But we had 750 staff back then, but there was 5,000 people working on the airport. And there were 30,000 jobs associated with the passengers that we provided across Scotland. And that was everywhere from Edinburgh, which is obviously highly represented, but everything to the Shetlands and the very far north of the country, you know, in the islands. Because if you're looking at connectivity, we were representing something like 60% of the connectivity of Scotland in terms of direct connections. And that's what really drives demand, is making it easy to get here and having a product or a reason to travel that people understand, whether it's world-class universities, whether it's, you know, fantastic mountain scenery in the north, or whether it's coming for the festival or whatever, or coming for business because the finance sector in Edinburgh. So, you know, we're there to connect all that and make it happen. And connectivity is clearly important to government, it's important to local authorities, and it's massively important for domestic job creation and balance of trade. So all of these things say that, you know, we're all in it together. There are always tensions, you know, whether it's being, you know, if you live as an immediate neighbour to Edinburgh, we're not the easiest neighbour to live with traffic and noise. We do our best to sort of mitigate that and minimise that where we can. But I think most people understand that you know, what we do is pretty crucial to the future of Scotland's economy.
Makes sense. Thank you very much, Gordon. Well, that's yeah, all the questions we've had time for today. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us for this morning's session. And thank you very, very much again, Gordon and Laura, for joining us and sharing your insight with us. It was really, really interesting, really useful. And Ignacio, thank you as well for your collaboration with us on this. Yeah, please keep an eye on we will continue with this Connecting to Spain series of events related to Scotland and Spain more specifically rather than the whole UK. So please keep an eye on the Spanish Chamber of Commerce's website for updates on those. And yeah, we've also launched a new webinar series called Brexit and Beyond, which is there's a different aspects. It covers the kind of the minutiae of how Brexit's affecting different sectors and companies operating in different sectors in both Spain and the UK. So I'd like to draw attention to those two. But thank you very much again for your time, Gordon and Laura and Ignacio. And yeah, all the best. Thank you.
I'll come and see you in Alicante very soon, I hope.
Yes, please. You are completely welcome. I will go to Edinburgh too.